Well, with the White House apparently parsing its words on whether former presidential attorney John Dowd discussed pardons with two big potential Russia witnesses, we want to dig deeper now on the question of what significance this might have, as David Gergen brought up. The bottom line, if the reporting turns out to be true, and if it turns out that some kind of offer was dangled, what are the implications? Joining us, a pair of Harvard University legal minds, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz and his former student, CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeff, the fact that Ty Cobb's statement is in the present tense, that's not actually rebutting the Times or the Post reporting, which is about conversations last year. Sarah Sanders basically referred to that statement. How big a deal is this?
Well, it's potentially a big deal, but I think, it's important that we put the Times story in proper perspective. There is nothing unlawful about a lawyer's discussing pardons. That is a power of the presidency. Where there could be trouble is if there was some sort of promise implied or given to witnesses in the Mueller investigation that if you don't cooperate, you will get a pardon.
Professor Dershowitz, do you agree with that? I mean, can the president pardon someone or have his lawyer float the idea to pardon someone if the intent is to obstruct or interfere with an ongoing federal investigation?
Well, I think there are two issues. The president can pardon unequivocally. President George W. Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger in order to stop the investigation. The special prosecutor, Lawrence Walsh, accused him of doing that to stop the investigation. It did stop the investigation. So the act of pardoning can't be a crime in my view. But if you negotiate a pardon in exchange for something of value, then you may very well have violated a criminal statute, not by giving the pardon, but by accepting or negotiating for something of value. I cannot imagine that sophisticated lawyers of the kind that are involved in this case would ever have that conversation in which the quid pro quo is mentioned. In exchange for this, we will give you a pardon, but if you don't do this, we won't give you a pardon. It is inconceivable to me that sophisticated lawyers would have had that conversation.
But if that, Professor, if that conversation, if it's implied that you don't cooperate, we give you the pardon, is that illegal?
Well, it really depends very much on how the conversation occurred, if it occurred. The president doesn't have to offer a pardon. Remember, Manafort said he wouldn't accept a pardon. That's not his power. The president can pardon you whether you like it or not. The president can pardon you even if you don't accept the pardon. The Supreme Court ruled that in an opinion by Justice Holmes many years ago. So if the president wanted a pardon, he could easily just have pardoned. I don't understand why he would have negotiated a pardon. If he gave a pardon, then there'd be no incentive for the folks on the other side to in any way cooperate, because there would be no leverage over them that would force them to cooperate. And obviously, they prefer not to cooperate than to cooperate. So the story doesn't really ring true to an experienced criminal defense lawyer like me.
Jeff, I mean, if Mueller wants to question John Dowd about whether he floated pardons, could Dowd simply decline to talk about it, citing attorney-client privilege?
Well, it depends. I mean, the attorney-client privilege only covers John Dowd's conversations with his client, with Donald Trump. He would have no privilege regarding conversations he had with other lawyers or other witnesses. I found myself in uncharacteristic agreement with most of what Alan said.
It's about time.
But you're taking a harder line, Alan. I mean, the idea that negotiating over a pardon to help your own legal situation, that is problematic. Where I disagree is the pardon itself, I think, could also be evidence of obstruction of justice. But certainly, using the pardon to try to get yourself out of legal trouble is, I think, problematic. But at least the New York Times story so far doesn't suggest that he did that, or at least they don't have evidence that he did it.
Well, I'm glad you're changing your mind now, because previously you said that the act of granting a pardon could become an obstruction of justice. Now you're backing away from that and saying it could be evidence of a conspiracy to obstruct justice. That's a very different position. I stick to my position. Professor Jack Goldsmith of Harvard agrees with that in the New York Times story today, saying the act of granting the pardon, the act of firing Comey, any act which in and of itself is constitutionally authorized, cannot form the basis for a criminal charge.
Well,
evidence of a conspiracy?
There, yeah.
Okay, well, if I lost you, you're not paying attention, because I think what I said was very clear.
The core obstruction of justice issue here has always been did the president fire James Comey in order to forestall, stop, interfere with the investigation of himself?
And that doesn't matter what the president did it for. That doesn't know. You see, it can't be a crime to fire Jim Comey, no matter what the motive is. If, on the other hand, he did something illegal in the process of doing that, that would be different. But you cannot commit a crime by engaging in a constitutionally protected act.
The world is full of crimes that take innocent or protected acts and make them criminal because of criminal intent. It's certainly not criminal to sell stock, but it is criminal to sell stock with inside information. That
bad analogy. We're talking about the President of the United States, who has constitutional authority as the head of the executive branch to hire and fire.
Let me just ask you, Professor Dershowitz, before we end, the president is having trouble, it seems, getting a team of attorneys. Does that surprise you? I mean, you were on the legal dream team of O.J. Simpson. He was able to get a range of attorneys, very smart attorneys representing him. Does it surprise you that the President of the United States seems to be having issues?
Well, first, I think there are a lot of conflicts of interest around Washington. Second, I'm told that he did not offer the job to Bob Bennett. Remember, I've said publicly that offering the job to the man who walked President Clinton into a perjury trap would be the worst possible judgment. And the president has indicated that that was not offered to Bob Bennett, that news story is not accurate. There are conflicts. There are matters of whether you want to get somebody who is an outsider, an inside guy, bad cop, good cop. It's not easy to assemble the perfect team when you're trying to play both good cop, bad cop. But I'm confident the president will be able to put together a very strong legal team. Already, I think some of the people on the team are very strong. Dowd resigned. I don't know the reason for it, but I think the president will be well represented.
All right. Professor Dershowitz, Jeff Toobin, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's another possible legal problem for President Trump looming when we continue a lawsuit alleging that payments by foreign officials who stay at the Trump International Hotel in Washington may actually violate the U.S. Constitution. Also coming up, another White House cabinet member is out. This time it's the VA secretary. We've got breaking news, surprising new details about how his replacement was chosen.